It's Reef Village, and it's under a giant mangrove tree. Go.
Yeah, go, exactly. So you guys are functioning almost like these new AI programs that get a verbal prompt,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like what is it, DALL-E or Mid-Journey, right? So I just say, okay, kind of a big, vicious flying fish, go. Hi, everybody. It's my pleasure to have this conversation with the two production designers of Avatar: The Way of Water, Dylan Cole and Ben Proctor, two guys that I've worked with now for 17 years, I guess. You were Dylan and Ben. You were both concept art directors on the first film. So let's just set the Wayback Machine for when you started on The Way of Water. What was it like when you found out that we were elevating you into the joint production design role?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we were really excited. I think first thing we did is call each other, because thankfully we knew each other and we're happy it was the other one, you know.
Right, right,
And
good.
that we had worked together in the past, and that was exciting. But we just, it wasn't just one film, it was a saga, and so it was and it's super exciting, and although a little intimidating challenge to jump into, but it's good part, it's good to have equal parts fear and excitement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Ben, it must have made sense to you to share duties with Dylan, because I think that right from the jump we said, all right, we're going to create two kind of non-overlapping worlds in collision, and you were going to handle the human technology and design and architecture and all that, and Dylan was going to handle the Na'vi and the natural kind of Pandoran landscape.
Absolutely. It's a great setup because we, from the very beginning, we were involved in all the same meetings. We got to immerse in the broader ideas about Pandora and where this amazing story and the arc of everything was going. And then we also got to constantly compare notes because we were co-located in the same art department. A lot of our artists went back and forth, so there was a natural sort of gelling that would happen between us. But as you say, we each had our own specialties in terms of what we're great at, specialties in terms of illustrators and other designers that we worked with. And I think that gives basically two really deeply researched and deeply explored aesthetics that in the movie come into collision. Sometimes you want them to be copacetic, but that discordance between the two styles is a huge a part of how it works, and so it's great having the two designers. Plus, just the quantity of work, it just makes sense to divide it.
Yeah, I mean, it basically boiled down to two teams, as I recall. So talk about kind of staffing up under you in terms of attracting the artists that you needed. Did you look at a bunch of portfolios? Did you call upon people you already knew?
It was definitely a bit of both. I mean, we had our first calls of our friends that we had worked with in the past, and so we brought in this really tight little SWAT team of concept artists in the early days. And then as we ramped up in the department, we again extended that net and looked at portfolios, and we just wanted the best. And personalities were very important to us too. It's one thing to have a good artist, but we really needed to make sure everyone gelled as a team, especially on something as big and complicated as this.
Right, exactly. And it's probably not necessarily well understood that all the creatures fell under your purview as well as being part of the life, the biosphere of Pandora. And so you brought in quite a number of very talented younger creature artists.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, at first, a lot of the initial designs were done by What a Workshop and Legacy Effects, and then we just knew we needed under like one umbrella. So we brought in many talented artists. We had Constantine Sakara, Zach Berger, Ian Joyner, Daphne Yap, all
Right,
this
right.
all-star team of creature design that helped bring World of Pandora to life.
Not with no disrespect whatsoever to the two companies you mentioned, we've all had a great history with them. I seem to recall that the final designs emerged most strongly with the in-house team, especially with respect to Payakan and the Tulkun, but also the Skimming and the Ilu as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Zach and Constantine, pretty much finished up and, did all the final touches on, Skimwing, Ilu, Akula, Payakan. That was a years long process, and, couldn't have done it
Yeah.
without this amazing internal team we had.
Well, I just want to point out for our audience that you are a very, very fine and talented artist in your own right, and you did a number of, what renderings that really blew up large, and that we basically papered the walls of the place with, and Ben did exactly the same thing. We surrounded ourselves with art, and just walking through your space was so inspirational to me and to the writers. So let's go back to the beginning of the process, because Dylan, you and Ben were brought on well before the writing team, which is counterintuitive. Most designers, I think, get a script and then images start to pop into mind. So what were the first provocations that I gave you? I can't remember. There was no treatment. There was no story.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were still figuring out broad strokes. I think writers were starting around a similar time. And the first thing you drew for me, we had our first meeting with you, and we were in the writer's room, and there was a whiteboard, and you drew mangroves with a suggestion of a village beneath it. And you're
Right.
like, it's Reef Village, and it's under a giant mangrove tree. Go.
Yeah, go. Exactly. So you guys are functioning almost like these new AI programs that get a verbal prompt. Right. Like, what is it, DALL-E or Mid-Journey, right? So I just say, okay, kind of a big, vicious flying fish, go.
In making a movie set on Pandora, Pandora doesn't exist, which means we are not only designing everything in the world piece by piece, but building it either in a virtual world or practically on physical sets.
One of the main challenges of designing something from the ground up is not just the design itself, but it's all the details.
To design every single thing in a world, every blade of grass, every leaf, every flower, every bug, it's daunting, but it's fun.
The challenge of designing for Jim, whether it's on the technical side or the natural side, is in Jim's mind, all this stuff is real. We're not making a movie, we're filming some reality that just happens to exist on another planet.
We decided that there were two worlds in collision. So you've got the human world, which is highly technological and highly recognizable to us. And then we split off the world of Pandora, the Na'vi, the creatures, the plants, everything in it.
We're introduced to this whole new world where we have beautiful tropical islands, but also there's a culture that lives in this very large mangrove called the Metcaina. And they have built their whole village suspended over the water under these roots. What's beautiful about Reef Village is that it very much exemplifies the Na'vi belief in connectivity.
This is our home now.
When we are designing creatures for Avatar, we often start with metaphors. The Tulkun is evocative of a whale, but when you look at it, this is not a whale at all. There's many, many different things different with it. You may not literally know exactly what is referencing, but you feel it.
Jim gives so much thought to everything that he does, and he expects our stuff to measure up to that level of realism and to be something that the audience just doesn't question. Hell's Gate, as formidable as it may have seemed in Avatar 1, was just a tiny piece of what the RDA is doing. It wasn't the full might that's available back on Earth. The RDA has a lot of money, and they're not messing around, and they're not going to make the same mistake twice. So when they come back on a whole different scale.
I'm an artist, a painter, designer, etc., but I don't think I designed anything on these films. Why would I? I get to work with the best artists in the world. You see these designers, just their brains are exploding with ideas. I just wish I could write a story so comprehensive that I can use all their ideas, but it's just not possible.
Your ideas were inspiring enough, but broad enough to allow us to explore, and so, we always stay close to the core idea, but to define that is a super wide net. And so that was a massive challenge. And back to the AI programs, I certainly wish we could have done it as fast as those, but instead it was
we did it the old way, the right way.
You did it the right way. Exactly. It's actually human human thought involved. And
But
speaking of
Jim,
human
one of the
thought,
early
Ben,
things that you had given me to think about is actually something that turns out to be in Avatar 5. And that just speaks to the fact that throughout that early conceptual phase, we were working
right,
across all of the movies. I mean, we didn't, again, like you say, we didn't even know what the compartments were going to be, but we were in fact
right,
exploring, Pandora and the whole human technological side of it as a universe, as a world,
right,
right?
right.
And I think that the depth to which we went into thinking of it as a real place with real problems and real technology and all that, as you say, was I think helpful and inspirational to the writers. But I think it comes through in the final product as well. I think the audience
Right.
unconsciously can see that there's something around every corner, even though you can't put your finger on it, or maybe it's not in frame. You sense this broader world, and I think that's the Avatar design ethos that we really kind of invented and explored together.
Well,
Yeah,
Tolkien
Jack,
used to
I
call it the
always like to
distant.
say, sorry.
Tolkien used to call it the distant mountains. That
Mhm.
he would imagine the world beyond the immediate, the area that he was describing. And I think we did the same thing. We always sort of created
Mhm.
a context. And if you think about it, you guys were starting with a blank page, but I wasn't, because I'd been thinking about it for about 6 months, and I'd written, literally over 1,000 pages of notes. So I knew some of the imagery that I was attracted to. And like you said, we were working across 5 movies. So when the writing team came aboard, well, actually, we were working across what ultimately became 5 movies. Avatar 1, it was already done, but we had to honor it. And then 2, 3, 4, 5. And, when the writing team came on, they were working the same way. They were working across the entire story arc. And we were designing across the entire story arc. I think we didn't really focus in on 2 to get to drill down to that level of specificity for at least a year, as I
It
recall.
was several years actually,
I think it might have been like
I
2.
think it's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
important to create a cohesive saga by doing that, because you have to know where you're going to figure out where to start. And and in showing that Pandora is just as diverse as Earth. It's not like other science fiction franchises where there's Jungle Planet, Snow Planet, or whatever. We definitely tried to approach this with that National Geographic lens of reality.
Right. So there's rainforest, there's Arctic, there's desert, there's ocean, all those different biomes and all the creatures and cultures. And so not only did we have to do creature design, but we had to do cultural design and imagining what these different Na'vi adaptations to these different biomes might look like. Desert people that the wind traders that trade, that travel around, that sort of thing. So do you want to talk to that and maybe mention Joe Pepe and that whole kind of
Yeah, for
cultural and
sure.
character design process?
Yeah, we knew one of our first big tasks was to figure out the Metcaina clan that lived in the oceans, and we first just called it Reef Village, and it became Metcaina Village. And Joe Pepe started same time Ben and I, actually a week before,
Mhm.
and
Right.
he was responsible for pretty much all the character designs in their anatomy and facial detailing. And Joe, we knew him as this amazing portraitist that brought humanity, but then one day he brought in these insane pencil renderings of like anatomical drawings that showed the like the strake modifications, and then like the tail, and like rule 1 that I remember you saying, Jim, is we're not doing Creature from the Black Lagoon. No webbed toes, no webbed feet. let's
Mhm.
Yeah.
let's
Yeah,
dismiss the
exactly.
obvious and move on.
It was,
And so
I
we
remember it being a
brought
really fertile period of creativity, and legacy effects. People got involved in that as well, because I go back with them way back to 1982, and that was, it's the legacy of Stan Winston's, creativity back then, and carried on by his guys after his death. And I remember they did a lot of the refining around the characters and aging Neytiri by 15 years and aging Jake and all that, and the finite kind of modeling of it. But a lot of the gestural stuff, I mean, all of the gestural stuff came straight out of our art department in-house, like
Absolutely.
Spider with his dreads, for example, and
Yeah.
putting the blue dye on himself and those things.
I think because Joe works with photographs, and often photographs of the actual actors who are going to portray the characters, there's a sort of spark of life that his stuff has right from the get-go, right? And you basically spend the next whatever 4 years or 3 years or whatever it is chasing that spark all the way to the final film frames, which are incredibly achieved by the actors' performances and all the digital methods. But what was really neat is just seeing, you kind of saw the characters when Joe jumped into them. And that was one thing that the writers have emphasized to me is that some of Joe's illustrations were turning points in their understanding of characters. When they saw Kiri for the first time as an image, something that seemed strange and Sigourney's going to play a teen, what is going on here, suddenly clicked into place, and it was super helpful.
Yeah. And she popped to life, right? So it's interesting when I think about my writing process and what we did, the way I work personally is I get a bunch of images that I want, but I don't know what order and I don't know how the plot gets to them. And then I also start from character. So I got an end goal, which is all these set pieces, but I start from character and I work my way forward. And then eventually the two collide and a plot sort of emerges. And it seems to me that we kind of did the same thing because we started with standing up the Sully family. The greater Sully family that includes Kiri, that includes Spider, an older, more mature Jake and Neytiri, the other kids, Loak, and so on. And even before we were cast, we had an idea what they were going to look like.
Yeah, and it was important because I remember those early things. We always shows them as a group so that you could evaluate it as a family, as a whole. Like that was just as important as the individual portraits themselves, was seeing the family.
Right, exactly. And I know, Ben, you had a lot of fun when I started proposing all these interesting vehicles and visual set pieces like Bridgehead City and, the various rotorcraft and the Sea Dragon itself. Why don't you talk a bit about that process for you and your kind of hard surface model team?
Yeah, I mean, we had big shoes to fill, right? The RDA's design aesthetic from Avatar 1 was so strong, the brutalistic architecture and these amazing, really militaristic vehicles, and then the whole bright colors of the construction vehicles. We had this great foundation, but we had to figure out what to do next, right? Because a big part of the story is that the RDA is coming back strong. This is kind of RDA 2.0, where we made a mistake we're never going to make again. And not only that, our mission is now different. We're actually going to colonize this planet, and we're going into the oceans. So we had these opportunities to kind of show a next generation of technology, a next generation of kind of attitude in the vehicles. I mean, we had tons of fun figuring out, like, Jesus, how do you top the stuff from Avatar 1? We just got to go all out. We got to give these things sometimes like an animal sort of reference to give them more personality. The Sea Dragon, right, has this mean quality to it and a very ocean creature-like presence as it approaches you on the water, because it kind of looks like a manta ray, right? And it's got a feeding mouth. And we leaned into all these things. I love it, as much as we do have the two specialized teams. I love it when I see principles of design that actually connect. So some of the tensile architectural stuff that you talked to Dylan about was really out of straight engineering, and somebody of the designs that we look at on the tech side are given their personality and their metaphor visually by animal references, or the crab suit, obviously, best example, right? It's literal biomimetic design.
But also the Sea Dragon being a winging ground effect craft that flies kind of like a flying fish, and then you've got the skim wings, which are basically the biological equivalent. Talk about your color palette, both you guys, because you were alluding to it there, that it was a very industrial and quite striking with primaries and so on. And Dylan, I think your palette was all sort of secondaries and pastels, right?
Yeah, we definitely avoided primaries. Like the one of the main relationships we did was the skim wing and how that graphic looked over the cyan ocean. So really wanted something to pop, so just went with orange. Make it mean. It's orange and black. Make it very aggressive. And some of my favorite shots in the film are when the Mechaina are riding out to the Three Brothers Rocks for the battle. And just the pageantry of all the skim wing coming out, those aerial shots where you see that graphic,
it's certainly strong. It was certainly, that was your strongest use of color, but I was thinking more about the bioluminescence, and there's a palette around the sort of softer, more spiritual side of Pandora with cyans and mauves and things like that. And I think Ben was more into the strong industrial and what do you call them, like caution colors, or
safety, high visibility type colors.
Yeah.
And for sure that Ben, you talked about how you do like that saturated stripe on a picador or something like that, and we for the underwater stuff, exactly, Jim, in the bio was keeping with the cooler, softer, glowier tones, and then in Mechaina Village itself was predominantly earth tones, because a lot of woven natural materials with with pops of color that could have come from the ocean. But it's really easy to think of Pandora as being insanely colorful and busy, and it's not as much as people think. Like when people's knee-jerk reaction is everything's super colorful, but it's really not. You know, we are restrained in our choice of color.
Yeah. Talk about the tensile architecture, because we wanted it to be non-architecture architecture, you know, something that might have evolved very, very naturally and fluidly.
Yeah, the tensile architecture, I mean, like just Na'vi architecture in general, like that was kind of a new concept, because in Avatar 1, they were, you know, pretty much living in home tree, and we saw a glimpse of other clans. So this was first time to really explore architecture. And, you know, based on your brief, we knew the Metkayina were master weavers. So like, okay, they are weaving their village. And then the tensile architecture aspect, you know, like we just avoid straight lines and right angles with Na'vi design. Just instantly take it off human, make it more elegant, make it more integrated. Like they, you know, where some architecture dominates its environment, the, you know, Na'vi integrate with it. So there are these, you know, long, sinuous, stretched, tensile walkways that are attached to the giant mangrove roots, and not just establish a visual connection, but it's a beautiful thematic one, because so much of the themes of Avatar is about connectivity.
Right.
And so, you know, you see the people are connected to each other through this, you know, system of walkways and their marui, but it also is just allowing them to live right above the ocean. So it's allowing them to be connected to the ocean. They can just jump off anywhere they please. One fun thing that you and actually, I don't think you even talked about directly, but what I've observed is that, you know, we have the strong themes of like the neural network from Awa. When you actually look at Metkayina Village and plan, the Maruis with the walkways actually look and is a very clear visual reference to our neural network as well. So you know, as much as we can have those visual themes throughout, you know, it just creates a visual philosophy for the film that is really strong.
Right, and you might want to mention the fractals and Mandelbrot sets as a design principle as well.
Yeah, you know, just trying to find things that subtly hint at the you know the intelligence of A1, sort of the intelligent design aspect to it. So we were using you know, mathematical formulas called fractals, which create different shapes. And so the Mandelbrot set is one that we used as a inspiration for a lot of the large macro coral structures we see underwater. And then we used a different set called the Julia Quaternion for inspiration for the seawall. And you know, it's like it sort of comes full circle, because you think of that visually, but then ultimately, you know, we always try and justify it from a scientific level. It goes back to that National Geographic principle. So I always thought of the seawalls being made by something like a rapidly calcifying plankton, where it's like accreted by the waves crashing against it, which kind of gives those sinuous forms. And they're the upwellings that come up from the depth.
Yeah, the pools, the upwelling pools.
The beautiful terrace pools.
Yeah, and we had a whole architecture underwater for how there was a living kind of cilia propulsive thing that moved that stuff up, or that it was tidally pumped in there.
Nutrient-rich water. Even I remember that stuff.
Yeah, we go deep on the science, but we don't explain it within the movie. It's just you know, that all exists externally if you want to look it up in Pandorapedia or whatever. Yeah.
Well, so speaking of shape language, you know, one of the things that I've noticed, almost in retrospect as well, is just the idea of Bridgehead being a perfect circle, right? That we have this cataclysmic horror moment, right, of using a starship to come down and burn Pandora, just, you know, clearing the work site, right? It's just the most efficient way to do it. It's, you know, the engineers thought about it, and that's what they figured out.
Just use an antimatter engine, also known as an antimatter annihilation engine, to just burn a dead zone that's 20 miles across. Then, you know, you've sort of made your statement. Awa's been pushed back, and you know, you're going to take over.
Exactly. But that imposition of a perfect geometric shape onto what was a beautiful undulating coastline is in a very simple way. It's a statement of one civilization trying to dominate and change another, right?
Exactly. Not integrating, but dominating. But talk about, you know, the thing is that you know, Dylan had to create sets that existed largely in CG, and then set pieces that the live actors could interact with, bits of force and so on. But you had to stand up actual big, complicated interior sets with moving doors and the whole kind of almost, in a sense, normal approach to production design as well, in addition to all the stuff that existed in CG. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure, sure. I mean, for a movie that is so heavily realized through visual effects, and that people look at and they think of it like kind of a digital movie, the amount of practical stuff that we build on both sides. I mean, to your point, Dylan had a whole bunch of practical builds, and the physicality of even our Zulu builds, which is what we call our proxy builds for performance capture, including the underwater ones, right? The physicality of the filmmaking is much more like a live action movie, and of course that extends to the live action high finished, camera ready sets. New Zealand is our go-to place for live action, and it's our go-to place for incredible partnerships that we have with really great teams down there. Kim Sinclair and Neil Kirkland, and of course Vanessa, our set decorator, have incredible teams, behind them and building really substantial sets. I mean, you think like, oh, we built like a bunch of little pieces of the Sea Dragon, right? But it's 400 feet long, right? So when you build a substantial little piece of it, you're filling Kong Stage, which is the biggest, sound stage in Wellington, New Zealand. So there was a lot of work that had to be done to figure out what we would build, which was a very direct partnership with Weta, right? With Dan Cox and Eric Santa, and figuring out all that stuff so that we weren't building too much or too little. And we knew we had a finish level to live up to, that the CG was going to look so good that the live action stuff had to look awesome. And that mutual influence, I think, and Dylan has a great anecdote with this, with the Sully Marui miniature of the live action finishes and physical building, right? Very true in Deb's world as well. And then the digital side of it, the way those talk to one another, I think was super fruitful and gives the film a great look.
Deb's world being, our costume designer, and how she had to execute on all these indigenous textures and constructions, physical constructions for the Na'vi. Even though the Na'vi were all realized in CG, every bit of costume had to be physically created so it could be worn. We could see how it moved, how it was weighted. I'm speaking for her now in her absence. But we had the Kong Stage, G Stage, F Stage. They're all huge sound stages here in Wellington at Stone Street, and an entire giant facility, probably 30,000 square feet out in Lower Hutt, and you had them filled with physical sets.
And Auckland, we shot in a whole other city. We ran out of room.
Shot in at Kumeu in Auckland as well. We had a tank there.
Yep.
You built mock-ups of the crab suit and the attack sub, the hunter sub.
Yeah.
And
we
so
flooded them.
People don't associate the film with a big physical build, but I remember the finishes and the physical execution, the craftsmanship here in New Zealand was spectacular, and that's a tribute to your designs as executed by Kim Sinclair as the senior art director and his construction team.
Absolutely, they killed it.
Yeah, and I think that practical reality extended to the virtual world as well. I mean, we tried to, as you were talking about Deb building the costumes, we tried to build as much as we could just for reference. Like, we built with Weta Workshop a giant 14-foot tall miniature of the Sully Marui, where the Sullys live at Mekaina Village. That was all made out of bent cane and woven with traditional flax. Right. And existed as a practical thing that you could touch, and most importantly had the layering to it, the stuff you could just never predict. And this was this beautiful finish miniature that then was photographed and 3D scanned by Weta Digital and became the basis for the textures, not just for the Sully Marui, but that language pervaded the entire village.
Or the whole village, because we had to understand how much rebound and displacement there'd be as people walked, and as multiple people were walking, how they would influence each other. And then they had to write algorithms to get the characters to do that. So we had to have something physical. And you had the team in Los Angeles build a giant woven, kind of like this freeform trampoline that went across a 150-foot soundstage that people could walk on, and we could actually record their motion and study their motion. So even though it was a capture set and it wasn't finished photographically, it had to do what it needed to do.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just the amount of tension we had to put that thing under to get it to stand was shocking. How many tons? And no, I mean, we used that set to capture that whole first walkthrough when you first get to Mekaina Village, and it wasn't just strong enough to have a couple people. I mean, we had, I think, like 24 to fill out the whole village of performers, and there's that beautiful moment of Took just walk along and starts bouncing, and you can't have. Like, that is such a real moment, because you put a kid on a bouncy walkway, that's what they're going to do.
That's just what she did.
Exactly.
That's not in the script.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you say your biggest challenges were, maybe in terms of individual set pieces or just overall organizationally? I'm going to ask both of you individually.
Sure. I mean, for me, it was Metcalfe far and away.
The village.
Yeah, the whole village. Just we spent a lot of time trying to figure out that language, and a lot of it was just figuring out, because we knew we had the walkways and we had the Marui, but I think our breakthrough point was figuring out those are kind of the same thing, that the walkway is the tensile structure that holds up their dwelling, and that
Exactly.
makes it unit. And we basically went low tech. We had kind of stymied on design. All right, guys, it's arts and crafts day, so we went down
Build
arts
a
and crafts
model.
store, got some tubing and some pantyhose and some wire, and just started pulling stuff around to make shapes. And it was just so freeing. And ultimately it's crude, but then we took photos and did drawings over it, and that was a real breaking point for us.
Yeah, I remember it being a stepwise process where we got some initial gestures down and we came up with these kind of complex, kind of tent-like structures, and you could, how much you could do with relatively few fixed points, and I remember we spent, was it a year? Was it a year designing that
More
village?
than that, probably. Yeah, it was a sizable process, and it came in bits, right? It's like, okay, now we have the language. Now let's get the detailing. Now let's figure out how we're going to capture it. So it was this, very, ongoing iterative process. But, I couldn't be prouder of where we ended up, because it feels natural and believable, but unexpected at the same time, which is
I see a whole Disney resort based around that design.
That's my retirement plan.
So, Ben, what was your toughest set piece or challenge?
Yeah, I mean, that one's easy. The Sea Dragon was by far
I figured.
the hardest challenge, right? Because it was like death of 1,000 requirements. The thing had to, have personality, feel like a creature in the ways that I'm talking about before, so that you'd psychologically understand the deep, when the Navi say a demon ship, what are they seeing? You got to sell that, right? It's got to be intimidating. It's got to have technology that looks like it would work in terms of the wing and ground effect flight and the hydrofoils and the transitions and all the amazing animation stuff that Weta worked with us on. But then story-wise, I mean, that thing is just used 1,000 different ways. You've got action and sight lines and requirements and versions of the set that are reused at a 90-degree angle, reused at a 180-degree angle as the thing rolls over.
Right.
You've got the underwater version. You're basically revisiting so many places in that ship, so many times in different ways, that each requirement would add some new detail, right? So that the sum total design is the result of all these micro story requirements. Even just, I'm thinking about it, like we had to make sure Jake could lean down when he's infiltrating the ship and see the girls tied up on the front rail.
That's right.
We didn't cheat that. We tried to make all those things work. And the fact that it actually looks cool at the end of the day and not just a mess is a huge satisfaction.
Right, and it had to work for what we call Parents from Hell, when Jake and Neytiri attack the ship and create different areas of the ship where they could kind of clean out the top, the crew that are the fighters that are up on top, and then attack down below, and then the whole thing flips upside down, and then Jake has to not be able to get out and get lost in this kind of maze of deck equipment. I won't say we didn't cheat a little bit here and there.
Cheated a little bit, yeah.
A little bit. There's a little bit of a fourth dimensional parts of the
thing.
ship that don't really exist, but yeah.
But the way that basically started off as a lot of design ideas and then evolved into a playground for you and Garrett's team, the stunt team, to figure out so many of those cool blocking, situations with, how Jake and Quaritch would fight on a staircase with chains, like all that stuff. It got used in such a rich way, and that those means drove the design, and so it's super cool.
The thing is, people do a lot of previs. We don't really do previs. You propose something, you have your 3D modelers build it, then I go fly the virtual camera through it and we talk. And then it's, well, what if you slid that over there? What if you made that bigger? Now let's flip it upside down and let me pretend I'm trying to find my way out of it underwater. It's very interactive with me as the director. I'm doing tech scouts on a set that only exists in virtual reality, that you've created based on sketches and ideas up to that point. And then it all changes after that, based on that new set of refinements. But it's highly interactive. And Dylan, I would say we operate the same way when it's the biological sets, like the forest or the reef or that sort of thing. Do you want to just comment on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, if anything, those are more interactive because, you know, it's not as obviously connected sometimes. So it's much easier to move a tree than it might be for, you know, Ben to move a wall or a door, you know. And so we can play a little more fast and loose with composing on the fly while still, of course, trying to, you know, maintain the integrity of the design intent. But
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is that in a sense, you know, I create the provocation, you guys create the art. Then from the art come models, and the models are often quite modular, and you'll arrange it so that, you know, you have a kind of a proscenium view of a section of rainforest that you like. That now I go in and walk around in VR using my, you know, virtual camera, and I say, well, what's my sight line down? What's my sight line up? If they're running along this log, you know, let's go through it and see how much of a run we've got. Okay, now, and that's a very, it's a very interactive kind of creative dialogue that you and I have, and that the other, you know, set designers that are working maybe on a scene by scene basis have with me. And then we start throwing lighting into it, and we move things around for lighting. You know, I always have a pretty good idea of what everything's going to be when I show up on the day to capture with the actors, because we've been through all these iterative stages together. Yeah,
those virtual scouts were by far the most valuable working days we had, like really just locking this stuff down. And we would do big, massive changes. And as you said, we try and, okay, here's our angle. And sometimes I would guess the wrong axis, or sometimes, you know, it's like, nope, it's this way. We're like, okay, cool, let's react. And just, and because of our system and our relationship and our trust, like we can make those kind of changes on the fly really quickly.
But it all starts with the art. You guys are great at just going crazy and coming up with something that looks amazing. And maybe sometimes it doesn't fit. Sometimes there's something within it that's worth fighting for, or sometimes it's just, I walk in, take one look at it and say, that's the shot in the movie. And I can name one that pops to mind was the Sully family flying across the lagoon to the Metcaina village in the background. That shot, I mean, that painting, which I believe you did, is actually a shot in the movie.
It is, and that's the highest compliment we can give, and you know, or that we can get is when that happens. And it's also was super exciting to, like, we would when the scripts did come in, we literally saw some of our artwork written into the script, you know, and it's like, okay, so that, you know, we're doing something here. Like one that jumps out to me is the Cove of the Ancestors, you know, describing the inverted arches, you know. It's like, okay, great.
Yeah, it gets written in, so it's a feedback loop, you know. The art inspires the writers, the writing, you know, creates the grand provocation for the art, and it just loops back on itself. And it seems like a really fertile and creative ecosystem to me. I love it. I hope you guys still love the process, because we got a ways to go.
We do for sure.
Still tons to do, and it is that blue sky design that is far and away the most fun. And so, you know, you get to have the, you know, the biggest, most exciting playground we can imagine. So it's true world building, and that's the most exciting thing for me.
Right. Well, I think we're pretty much out of time here. This has been a great discussion. Hopefully you've been able to share with everybody a bit of your process. Trying to pack 7 years, 8 years of work into a half-hour conversation is a little daunting.
Closer to 9.5, actually, I think, for us.
Yeah. So 4 movies designed and 2 of them shot across 9.5 years, and we still got a ways to go. So I don't know what we're sitting around here for. We should get back to work.
I just wanted to give hats off to our teams. You know, you're talking to us in this interview, in this conversation, but you know how many people were involved, and
Sure.
You know that just like with any other department, but maybe with art, you know, it's closest to our hearts. People put their all into Avatar movies. They bring everything, you know, all the ideas that you were talking about, the random creative instincts, but just the passion for excellence, the passion for wanting to create a world together. And every single member of the team, whether it was someone in LA who's a conceptual art director or illustrator, incredible team that we had, or every artisan in New Zealand that had to bring that stuff, you know, into physical fruition. Everybody brought it, and the movie feels and looks different as a result. So it's an honor to work with these teams.
Indeed.
It's an amazing team, and let's end with that thought that we've got this amazing team that we get to work with ongoing. So anyway, thanks guys. Congratulations on your nominations. They're richly deserved, and you know, good luck on Oscar night, and just thanks from the bottom of my heart for your creativity.